Welcome to today's webinar titled Overview of the Five-Step Improvement Process. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University, who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline Project. Before we start this presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1 hour and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available by the end of next week on the stemequitypipeline.org website. As you have already found out, you will be watching the presenter present slides through the WebEx interface while listening to them talk over the phone. All the attendees' phones have been automatically muted. The presenters will answer questions after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. There are two ways we will take questions. For the first way, at any time during the presentation and during the Q&A, you may submit a question by typing it in the Q&A panel at the bottom right of your WebEx screen. Mimi or I will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. The second way we will take questions is only during the Q&A by speaking over your phone. If you wish to ask a question during Q&A, please click the raise hand icon at the bottom of the participants panel during the Q&A period. I will unmute your phone and ask you by name to ask your question. When we are finished, I will then mute your phone again. I would like to start this webinar by introducing Mimi Lufkin, CEO, National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity Education Foundation, and STEM Equity Pipeline Project Director. Mimi?
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm actually on the West Coast at the moment, so it's still morning here. I'm particularly pleased to see that there's so many people attending today's webinar. It looks like we have, at this moment, about 111 people participating. I know that we have close to 200 people have registered for the webinar, so they'll probably be joining us as we move along here. I also want to recognize Santa Rosa Junior College for providing me with the technology for participating in today's webinar. John Hemming and the staff here at the Santa Rosa Junior College Library have been very helpful in getting me connected, so let me recognize them at this time too. The purpose of today's webinar is to give you a very brief overview of the STEM Equity Pipeline Project, which we always do at the beginning of all of our webinars, and then to do the fastest version of the five-step process you've ever seen. Now, for those of you who are on the webinar and have been involved in some of the training we've done in the past, you know that this five-step program improvement process training is typically done over a 2-day period. So what I'm going to do today in 1 hour is just give you a sense of what it is that the training focuses primarily on, but certainly will not give you anything near the depth of the information that you would get if you participated in any of the 2-day trainings that we are doing in the 5 participating states. I'd recommend that you continue to keep your eyes open for either alerts from us. Participating in this webinar will automatically put you on the listserv, and also to continue to check the stemequitypipeline.org website to look for upcoming events, to see when a 5-step process training might be conducted in your state, and or if there's some shortened versions of it happening in a variety of conferences that are going on in some of the states as well. We will be doing a series of webinars on each of the steps over the next 4 months. So again, keep your eyes open for those announcements as to when those will be, and they'll also be, of course, posted on the homepage of the STEM Equity Pipeline website. But let's go ahead and get started. First of all, very quickly, just to make sure that everyone understands a little bit about the project, this is a National Science Foundation funded extension service grant that we've received from NSF. And there were a variety of things that we needed to respond to that sort of frame the way in which we're doing this project. One is that we proposed to the National Science Foundation a unified program of change process that we're using for working with the states that we're in. This basically is the 5-step process. That will be providing consulting services within a certain community of practice, and the community of practice that we've chosen is the formal education community, particularly career and technical education, teachers and professional developers who are working in the STEM-related career cluster program areas, as well as core curriculum teachers of math and science. The purposes of the grant is to adapt exemplary projects, research-based learning tools, pedagogical approaches, and service or support programs. So one of the things we will be doing throughout the 5 years of this project is to be trying to share with you effective strategies. Also facilitating the interpretation of research knowledge into practice. Much of what we do when we talk today about step 2 of the 5-step process around root causes is really translating research into the practice that what it is that we know is effective through research, as well as what we know about theory, gender equity theory, bias theory, that will help us understand the barriers that students face. And the last is that we are asked to inform the National Science Foundation's research agenda. So one of the things we will continue to do throughout the project is to get feedback from participants about what research NSF could do that would help us in this arena. The project has 3 basic goals: to build the capacity of the formal education community, and capacity in this sense is about professional development, which is really a train-the-trainer project. Our purpose is to build the capacity of people who conduct professional development in the states in which we're working, particularly around gender equity and STEM. The second is to institutionalize the implemented strategies by connecting the outcomes to existing accountability systems. I'll talk more about that in step 1 in the 5-step process. And the third is to broaden the commitment to gender equity in STEM education in general. And so we do a lot of outreach activities as well. This is the model that we're using for the project. We have a national advisory board. We have what we're calling an extension services group, which consists of both research and practitioner experts. We have people who work directly with the states, who are our state facilitators, and they're the group that provide the professional development to consulting services and technical assistance to the state teams. That's the third layer. The state teams are people who do professional development in the states. They could be everywhere from staff at a local educational agency who work with teams of teachers in their local educational agency. They could be state agency personnel, or even people who are doing work at the county level, et cetera. And then that's our direct service connection there. You can see from the arrows is from this extension services group to the state team. And the idea is for that group then to go out and work with local educators through a train-the-trainer model to provide them with best practices, improvement strategies, and using the 5-step process to help them develop effective programs at the local level. The arrows that are around the edges represent the virtual learning community, and that includes, for example, these webinars that we do online, as well as all the resources that we have on our website, and I'd encourage you to go take a look at that at your leisure. There are currently 5 states participating in the project: California, Missouri, Illinois, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. We will be adding 2 states this next year, starting October 1, and 3 states in year 3, 3 more states in year 4, with 13 states participating over the life of the grant. So if you happen to be located in a state that hasn't been selected at this point, we just completed our 2nd year selection, not unfortunately in a position to announce who the next states are, but we will probably do that sometime in the next couple of weeks. But if you are in a state that might be interested in participating, there will be an opportunity to apply in the spring to participate in year 3. A little bit more specific about the work we're doing, there are 2 areas that we are focusing, what National Science Foundation calls our areas of intellectual specialization. One has to do with accountability, using data to drive program improvement, and really the 5-step process is based on that, and you'll see that in just a moment. The second is professional development, implementing effective extension services in the formal education community, and extension services in this way means consulting, technical assistance, and professional development to teachers through people who are professional development specialists in the states that we're working in. So basically what we will be doing with the state teams, the folks on the state teams, is providing professional development to them through the 5-step process training, as well as lots of other ways of bringing experts in on specific content that the group identifies. We will also be doing some consulting and technical assistance. The state facilitators that work with each of the states are focused in that area. We have virtual web-based professional learning community activities, like, for example, these webinars and the series of trainings that we're doing. And then lastly, we'll be, of course, documenting the processes that we learn, the things that we learn basically, so that in the future, if other states wanted to take this on their own to implement a similar program, we'll have all the information available for them to do so. The central core of the training, which you, I'm sure, have picked up already by the fact that I continue to repeat this over and over again, is the five-step process. And so let's take a look quickly at all five of the steps. I will admit right here up front, so everyone's clear about this, that step 1, 2, and 3 are the ones that we tend to focus on primarily because they're really more about the content of the gender equity pieces that we want to focus on here. And I'll talk briefly about step 4 and 5, but you'll see that step 1, 2, and 3 will be the major emphasis. So let's first start off with step 1. Step 1 is all about documenting performance results. And within the community of practice that we've chosen, the career and technical education community, we happen to be, fortunately, in a situation where we have an accountability system that's been in existence since 1998, and one that includes 2 measures related to non-traditional training and employment. There are 5 and 6, depending on whether it's secondary or post-secondary, indicators in Perkins 4, which is the legislation that was just passed this in 2006 and is now being implemented. But prior to that, in Perkins 3, there were 4 core indicators, and the 4th one included non-traditional career and technical education. That measure continues in Perkins 4. The 2 measures deal with participation of underrepresented gender students in non-traditional career and technical education programs and completion. So there are actually 2 different measures, sort of the entry measure and the exit measure for non-traditional CTE. Just to be sure we're all clear about the definition when we talk about non-traditional, because it's a term that's often used, especially in the college community, to mean students who are 36 or students who are single parents, or they're non-traditional students in a much broader sense. In the way in which I will use the term and the way in which we use the term in this project and in Perkins 4, the term really has to do with occupations or fields of work where one gender comprises less than 25% of the individuals employed in that field of work. For example, women in engineering are considered non-traditional for their gender in that occupation, and men in nursing. The reason we have chosen to connect our work with the Perkins measure, because of our emphasis, of course, in career and technical education, is that all STEM-related career cluster programs that we've identified in the project, and if you're interested in knowing what those are, you can go to the website and see. They're all identified, both the clusters and the pathways. There's 7 of them. Those areas are all non-traditional for women. And so it ties in very nicely with the data collection system that's going on in Perkins 4. So what is it? I mean, why start here? I know that in our community, especially the work that's been done in gender equity for so long, and I'm sure many of you have attended many conferences and have gone many places where everyone always talks about the programmatic side of things, implementing the strategies. And it's very easy to go to a conference and hear about sort of the next best thing that someone's doing and want to take it home and implement it in your site. My warning label here is that that's a dangerous thing to do, because you might be in a circumstance where you, for example, or your students are experiencing something different barriers, et cetera, than the students in the location in which this strategy was effective. The only way to really understand that is to back up 2 steps in the process and really start at the beginning. And so what you want to do is you really want to understand the problem completely before you go out to seek a solution. So So in this training, what we do is we really look at 4 different things. How do you analyze performance data? And we do a lot of that kind of work. What questions should be addressed in relationship to that data analysis? What are some of the tools and methods that you can use to present and analyze the data? And we look at data in all various forms so that people understand it. And the 4th is how should data quality problems be considered when analyzing data? It's very easy often to blame the data for the results rather than moving beyond that and realizing there may be certain data quality issues, but taking that into account so that the data analysis that you use is accurate and important. Again, going back to this idea of looking at Perkins accountability measures as one of the sources for the data collection because it happens to be central to the work in career and technical education, there are the 2 measures, and I wanted to make sure everyone understood how these measures are constructed. First of all, in terms of the way in which they're flagged or tagged or named in the 2 versions of Perkins. In Perkins 3, the non-traditional measure was 4S1, 4 standing for the 4th core indicator, S stands for secondary, 1 stands for participation. Same thing for 4P1, 4 is the 4th core indicator, P stands for post-secondary, and 1 for participation. So those, if you look on the various resource websites and things that I will give you later in the presentation, you might want to keep this designation in mind because the indicators are often referred to by the way in which they've been flagged. In Perkins 4, which actually the first set of data collected for Perkins 4 has just been submitted to states from local educational agencies and is currently being used right now for either negotiating local performance measures or planning for Perkins implementation. And they're different because in the reauthorization of the legislation, there are now 6 secondary measures. So the last of the measures is the non-trad measure. So 6S1 is the non-trad measure for secondary for participation. And there are 5 post-secondary measures, with the 5th measure dealing with the non-traditional measurement, and so it's 5P1. So when you start to see Perkins 4 information, I just want to be sure people are clear about that. So this, for example, is one of the things that we do, is really get clear about where the data is, how to analyze it, and understanding also how it's marked so that we're clear about what we're looking at. The participation rate construction is the number of underrepresented gender students in non-traditional CTE in the numerator. That would be, for example, all of the females enrolled in auto technology, engineering, and all the men in the nursing programs and child care, et cetera. And the denominator are all students participating in those same programs, whether they're of the underrepresented gender or not. So it's really taking a look at just the non-traditional career and tech ed programs and the comparison of what percentage of those students are of the underrepresented gender. And when I use the term underrepresented gender, again, meaning the girls that are in auto technology, the boys in nursing, as an illustration. Same thing applies for the completion measure, same issue in terms of its flagging in number designation, and the measurement construction is exactly the same. It's looking at a slice in time. At this point in time, if we take a look at all students who are completing non-traditional career and tech ed programs, those programs that have been identified as preparing students for non-traditional careers, what percentage of those students are of the underrepresented gender? What percentage of them are the women in the auto technology program that have completed, and what percentage of those completers the men in the nursing program are completing? So that gives you sort of that sense. Those are the 2 measures that we look at. And then we look at disaggregation. There are certain requirements within Perkins 4 now for disaggregating data. This was not required in Perkins 3. However, the U.S. Department of Education still asks states to submit data in this form, and so it was collected the same way in Perkins 3. So it gives us a much richer way to look at data. We disaggregate data by gender, male and female, by race and ethnicity. These are the categories currently being collected under Perkins 3 and will continue to be collected under Perkins 4. And then special population status. So one of the things that we do in the training is talk about how do we do comparisons of these groups one to another or within different population groups within the school, whether it's just those students in non-traditional CTE or those students in all career tech ed programs, or all the students in the school, as a way to identify gaps in performance. We also encouraged the analysis of comparisons between a local educational agency and comparing themselves to a state, the state's average or performance level. And we do that analysis and review that information. One of the things in states where there's access to public information, public data about career tech ed performance, which actually is the case in many states, they've published that data online. You can see how other schools are doing in the state and compare yourself to who is performing the best as a way to sort of get a sense of what's going on. We talk a lot about selecting peer benchmarks, sites that are similar in demographic characteristics, geography, or program mix, and picking someone to compare yourself to that's like you. Or, of course, setting your own benchmark. That's also another possibility, too. We look at trends. We prefer 3 to 5 year trends when we have access to that level data. Just did a training this week in California. We had almost 8 years worth of data available that we could do some trends analysis with. Very interesting stuff. It's really difficult to look at data in a single year slice because it doesn't give you any sense of whether or not you're in a slump or a bump. So trend analysis is also very important. And the other thing, too, probably more importantly, is at what level do you really want to study the data? You can look at data statewide, gives you kind of the big picture, doesn't really help you, I don't think, at the local level. Even district-wide doesn't give you much to tell you about what's really happening potentially locally, unless you're in a really tiny district. School-level data is also available from the Perkins analysis, which will tell you how all non-trad students are doing school-wide. But probably most importantly is looking at program-level data. If you were to take a look at what's going on just within your mechanical engineering program, or just within your auto technology program, or just within your plumbing program, or your electrical program, or those kinds of things, that is probably the most relevant and most informative data available for determining gaps in performance in terms of whether students are participating or not, or whether they're completing or not. That's the analysis we try to focus on the most. And you can compare that back then to the higher level site-specific analysis for information purposes. I'm giving you here just a couple of resources. If what I've said sort of triggers your interest about looking at some of your Perkins data, I would suggest that the Peer Collaborative Resource Network, which is actually a U.S. Department of Education site, has all 50 states Perkins data, state-level data there. It's available for you to review. Go take a look at what's going on in terms of the performance of your state during the Perkins 3 time period. We've done a couple of analyses that have been helpful for folks. One is a publication we've done called Growing Pains. It's actually a review and analysis of all the state-level data under Perkins 3. It's really, again, though, it's more of a national picture of what's happening in relationship to performance on the non-traditional indicator. It's just a piece specifically on that. We also have developed a crosswalk of SOC stands for Standard Occupational Codes. It's what the Bureau of Labor Statistics use to report labor data. And so what we've done is crosswalk those SOCs, the Standard Occupational Codes, that are non-traditional. In other words, there's less than 25% of one gender employed in that particular occupational area. We've crosswalked those with the classification of instructional program. That's the SIP classification of instructional program. For those programs that prepare students for those career areas, to help states identify what programs should be designated as non-traditional when they prepare their list for implementation of Perkins 4. If you're in a situation where you're not sure about what your program, which programs are non-traditional for you, I would really encourage you to contact your state agency to obtain from them the list of programs in your state that have been identified as non-trad, so that you know where you stand in relationship to that. Because that's the data that's collected is on those programs specifically. Check your state agency website to see whether or not your Perkins data is available in a public forum. Many of them actually do have that. Missouri, for example, has district-level data, program-level data, a wonderful website. California does the same thing for their community colleges. There are a variety of states who have been very forward-thinking about this. In most cases, you probably have access to data reports at the local level, so I encourage you to go take a look at those things. There are other data sources that we talk about in the training as well. The National Center for Educational Achievement, just for the kids, has district-level data that it really focuses more on the academic side in terms of being able to look at what's happening with course-taking patterns and enrollment patterns disaggregated by gender and by race at the district and school level. So we do look at some of that. The National Center for Educational Statistics has huge databases. For those of you that are on the call that love to do research, go digging there. Southern Regional Education Board has a data library, again, a good resource. And we also look at other state data and other local data and explore what options there are out there. So the question I have for you, and we'll see if Greg can pop up our little poll screen right now, is how many of you have used your Perkins data to identify gaps in performance for students pursuing non-traditional careers? And on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a poll. And what you need to do is just pick one of the answers, A, B, C, or D. I do this all the time. I'm a data geek. I've tried with some success. In other words, you're really putting your effort into it. You've tried but have failed miserably. And I can't figure this out and need help. Or I don't even know where the data is. Those are basically the four responses, excuse me. So if you could pick one that best meets or closely addresses sort of where you are in the scale of using data for program improvement, go ahead and answer the poll and click submit. And there's a 30-second time limit, and looks like maybe the remaining time is over, so hopefully everyone's responded by now. And we'll see here in a minute what the response rate looks like. Looks like a lot of people feel that they don't have access to the data, or there's no answer, excuse me. Probably the largest response was no answer. Maybe some of you didn't get a chance to answer quickly enough. But even from the scale, looks like 21 of you have tried with some success. Yay for you. The I do it all the time. I wonder if we have 2 data analysis people on the call. And 27, I don't have access to the data. So take some time. For those of you who answered D, I'd encourage you to start asking questions, because it might surprise you what will appear all of a sudden, and you'll have information that will be of value to you. We talk a lot about this in the training and help you also find the data too. All right. So let's move on quickly now to the second step. Realizing that we just, based on when we do this analysis, we take almost half to 3/4 of the first day doing the data piece because it's really, really important. And everyone that comes to the training usually brings their own local data so that we can do some good analysis of it. And then we also prepare data report reviews from the data that we have access to from the states as part of this project. So works pretty well. The second step is about identifying root causes. So why can't we just go from the gaps analysis that we do with the data to the strategies? Well, again, I will say it, you'll get sick and tired of hearing me say this, but we want to try to keep from fixating on the fact that there happens to be some silver bullet out there, because there is not. If there was, we would not be where we are. And so there are lots of factors that impact students' choice around non-traditional career options, their access and entry, as well as retention issues in order to keep students in programs. So there are lots of conditions or factors that cause or permit a performance gap to occur. We talk in the training, we talk a lot about those causes that are direct causes, in other words, those that are closest to the root of the problem, and indirect causes, because it's often easy to sort of get sidetracked by indirect causes and think if you can fix those that you will be able to fix the entire piece. And the reality is you want to try to get as close to the direct cause as possible. an illustration of this is, for example, if we decided the solution to all our problems around instructional strategy issues, if we would just include a course in the teacher education process around gender equity, effective instructional strategies around gender issues, or dealing with students with diverse backgrounds, that would solve the problem. The point being that what we really want to do is we want to change teachers' behavior in the classroom. And we all know that we teach the way we've been taught, and it's so easy to fall back on that easy way to do things. And so really the direct cause has to do with teacher behavior in the classroom. So how do we integrate, I'm not suggesting that including a course at teacher education level is not a good thing to do. It certainly is, but it's not it's not going to solve it all the way down the line. What has to happen is either, well, certainly through the supervision models that go on in schools in terms of principals working with teachers in the classroom to improve their instructional practice. All of the strategies we know about instructional practices should be included. And so the direct cause issue really has to do with how do we change the behavior of teachers. And so the strategy needs to be a classroom-based strategy. And so that really kind of illustrates the difference about where the intervention should occur in order to really impact the cause more directly. And we talk about that for a whole variety of root causes that have come out of the research. We discussed strategies that can happen at the local level about how to search for the most direct and highest impact cause, how to employ a systematic evidence-based process for doing that, that it's really important to formulate or test theories or hypotheses, and we do a couple of exercises to sort of model how you can do that with a group of, for example, teachers or parents or even students, and continue to emphasize the fact that who we really need to hear from are the students, because they're the ones, again, going back to this direct cause issue, they're the ones that we're trying to be working directly with. So it's not the perception of the faculty that you want to get, it's really the perception of the students. We draw on current research and evaluation. I'll give you a resource that you can look at immediately in relationship to that. We talk about how to use multiple methods and data sources for collecting information in regards to the identification of root causes. And then we are always sure to talk about the fact that you might find multiple causes and talk about an analysis you can do to sort of determine which would be have the highest impact and most cost effective, or have most support by people. There are many qualitative data, and this is sort of the qualitative data collection piece, that needs to occur in the identification of root causes. The first step really just gives you, the first layer of a view about where the gaps might exist. Then you need to go in and dig. And this is the digging process, identifying the root causes. So analyzing student data is one of the quantitative pieces, but then there are lots of other things to be done. Reviewing research literature, which I'm sure many of you absolutely would love to spend your time doing that. So although I'm being a little bit facetious here, I do know there are people who like to do this, but we've done this analysis and have it prepared for you in the resource I'll give you in a minute. And we're also updating that piece as well. You can also review program or instructional evaluations and effectiveness reviews that have happened for other activities that you've implemented to determine whether or not those have been effective. Conducting focus groups and brainstorming and doing peer benchmarking, interviewing and surveying, all of those things, especially with students, are really valuable tools for identifying root causes. And in the training, we provide lots of resources about how to do each of these things effectively. I would recommend, if you have a chance and you're interested in the actual root cause identification, which I am not going to talk about today, I'm not going to actually tell you what they are. This research summary provides a framework for how to think about the identification of root causes. And what we've done in this research summary was we actually went through all of the the literature, did a literature review of research that had been conducted in non-traditional career and tech ed as well as in STEM fields, because most of the research actually has been with women in science and technology and engineering and mathematics programs, and condensed that into a document that identifies the root causes, proposes the theory for each of those root causes, and describes the evidence and all of the research studies that were used and that are referenced in the back of the document for people who really want to go and take a look at them more closely. That research summary is available. The title of it's there on the first bullet. Robert Sheets, myself, David Stevens did this summary for the National Center for Career and Technical Education. There are 6 chapters in the summary. The 6th chapter deals with the non-traditional indicator. The other chapters deal with the other indicators in Perkins 3. So if you're interested in root causes for academic performance or technical skill attainment or completion, the same information is available. Robert and David did the other sections of this document. I wrote the piece dealing with the non-traditional indicators. It's available online at our website, the entire document, all 6 chapters. And so just that link will get you there to our publications page. Just scroll down the publications page until you find this title, the first bullet. Click on it and it'll open and the document would be available for you. Not to toot the horn of those of us who did this work, I have to say that over and over again, and all of the times I've used this document, people have ranted and raved about what a great resource it is, because it really sort of frames the thinking about the identification of root causes, and I encourage you to go take a look at it. So that's step 2, realizing again that we do many hours of this, and we actually talk about what all the root causes are, what the research says about them. We talk about bias literacy, all the theories that are out there around stereotype threat and attribution theory and locus of control and self-efficacy research and all of that. The content of all of that is covered in the training. And I'll talk more about all those things when I actually do the second step webinar. But you can sort of start to get a sense of those things if you read that research document. It should be very useful to you. So let's take a look now at the third option here. Choosing best solutions. This is where we all would like to start, but again, I'm going to say that doing step 1 and step 2 prior to this time is really, really important. So, again, the big message is don't be too quick to adopt best practices before getting the facts straight. And probably some of you are thinking, wow, when am I ever going to get to the implementation phase of this whole thing? Well, the point really is that it's not sensible to waste your time implementing a strategy that isn't going to work because you haven't done the adequate research ahead of time in order to pick the right strategy to implement at all. So, again, with that philosophy in mind, you certainly could document performance results, do a series of action step kinds of research pieces on your campus or to identify root causes, and pick a strategy and implement it. I would say you certainly could do at least the first 2 steps within a 6-month time frame and start focusing towards implementation right away. And that really fits into the Perkins planning process, I think, very well. So in the training, we talk about how do you identify possible strategies and model practices. And we do a whole thing on how to evaluate them. We talk about what are the best practice pieces that have been identified already out there. We talk about how to evaluate strategies and models for your own particular circumstance. And how do you compare and assess alternative solutions to make a decision? And there are a variety of factors that you want to take a look at. And we'll talk briefly about those today, but not certainly in any depth. Failure is expensive, and so it's important that you pick a strategy that you know is going to work. Building consensus among staff and stakeholders is key to that. There's nothing like being out there by yourself trying to do something when you don't have all the people that you need behind you to implement a project. So having them all participate in the process of identifying the strategy and moving forward with it is really important. Getting their full support and commitment, that is all part of that process. We encourage people to select a full range of choices, to be very creative. Many times you may see a model that you know would potentially work but needs some tweaking for your circumstances. Those are all the kinds of things that are part of the solution selection. And then, of course, implement some systematic analysis of evaluating the solution prior to implementation to know whether or not you think it would work in your circumstance. And that includes everything from comparing the locations in which it was implemented to your own circumstance, student demographic information, you know, the skills of the people who are involved in implementing the solution, the location of the sites, etc. We look at potential strategies and models as well, and there are a couple of places I would encourage you on your own to do a little digging. One is the National Science Foundation has generated 3 reports called New Formulas for America's Workforce, and all 3 of these reports are a compilation of the summaries and outcomes of the various projects that they have funded over the last 15 or more years. These are all available in PDF format online. When you can go to, actually at the beginning of this webinar there was a link that you could download this PowerPoint, but it'll also be available in the archived version. You can get to it. Or if you just Google New Formulas for America's Workforce, I'm sure it'll show up. But there's a link embedded in the back of the PowerPoint on this, so that if you have this up on your screen and you click on it, you can't do it now in the PowerPoint, just so don't try it. It won't work. When you have the actual PowerPoint on your own computer and you have it in the slide mode, you can click on that. It'll open an Internet Explorer window and take you right to the link. But you can Google that, and I'm sure it will find it. The other is, so that's one good place to do a little looking about strategies and where they've worked and what circumstances they've been in. And the great thing about those publications is it actually gives you the people who are implementing them and how to contact them, so you could find out more information beyond what the summaries show you. The Programs and Practices at Work project is something that we've done for the last 4 years with the National Women's Law Center, the National Association of State Directors of Career and Technical Education, and the Association for Career and Technical Education. It's a project where we've sought applications from programs who've been effective in improving their performance on the non-traditional indicator. Just so you understand, the criteria for the award that we give for this project is very rigorous. Anyone who's received the award has been able to prove using data that the activities that they've implemented have increased either their participation rate or their completion rate in their non-traditional program. And if you click on this link, or you just go to the NAEP website at www.napequity.org, which is our website, there is a link right on the home page to this page, which actually has information about all the award winners, summaries of the reports from each year that summarize the best practices, and you can find out more about each of those projects. And they range everywhere from a community college mentoring program where they had second-year students mentoring the first-year students in their non-traditional programs and increased their retention rate by over 30%, to a middle school exploration program that also showed over 30% increase in their non-trad participation rate after they implemented it. This is at Minot Public Schools, called Diva Tech Day. There's another award winner is Project Ignite at Seattle Public Schools. It's a very, again, a mentoring type of program where they bring in women engineers from the high-tech industry community and work directly in schools with girls. Prior to the time the program was implemented, their IT programs and tech programs were in the less than the teens, I would say, enrollments of girls, and now they're 50% or more. So those are all programs that have been very successful, and they're all programs that have replication information available, etc. That was something that was very important to us. A couple of other links, so best practices in STEM education. Actually, if you go to the STEM Equity Pipeline website, there's a best practices page, and it includes quite a few resources on best practices in science, technology, and engineering and math education programs. And the Engineering Equity Extension Service project is another thing we've been involved in. There are some best practices that are there as well. This is with the National Academies of Engineering work that we've been doing with Project Lead the Way. And all the links to these are live when you get the PowerPoint, or if you go to our website, there are links to Programs and Practices at Work and the EES project right on our homepage. So you can get to that information there. And the best practices in STEM education information is on the STEM Equity Pipeline website under the Professional Development menu where it says Best Practices. So we talk about all kinds of solutions, and we have more resources than you can shake a stick at, and ideas about strategies and places where they've been implemented, how-to handouts and manuals and that kind of thing. So that's all part of the training. Included, of course, is the tie back to the root causes piece. This slide should look familiar because you've seen it before. The document that I mentioned earlier that includes the identification and distillation of the research around root causes also includes tables related to strategies. So what we did at the same time when we were looking for sort of the theoretical root cause information, we also looked at what strategies existed out there in the research that had proven to affect those root causes. So there are two tables, tables 18 and 21, that cross-reference the strategies to the root causes that they impact based on the review of the research, and then describes what those strategies are very briefly. So that information is also available in this research summary and can be a valuable tool. So it's all kind of compacted into one item. And I encourage you to go take a look at that if you haven't already seen it. So based on that, let's do another little poll and see what we're finding out how people are doing. So how are you feeling about the 5-step program improvement process? We've talked a little bit about the first 3 steps, realizing I haven't been able to give you much information in terms of details. It looks like you've got 45 seconds to answer the question. So are you excited? Are you curious? Are you frustrated or overwhelmed? In other words, you're excited, you're ready to go look at all those documents and start to consider how to impact this. You really want to know more, so you'd like to participate in some of the other webinars and maybe get to a training and that sort of thing. You're frustrated, you still can't even figure out how to get the data, so you're still stuck in step 1. But you're ready to move. And the fourth one is, I can't possibly fathom all this information. Realizing that, of course, I'm trying to slam into 50 minutes here or 55 minutes, everything that we do over a 2-day period, and even after a 2-day period, it's a little bit too much to try to slam in 2 days. So how are you feeling about all of that? We'll see what the results say here in just a moment. Oh, all right. Looks like we've got lots of curious and excited people. Well, that makes me really excited, too. I'm glad to know that. I didn't want to frustrate or overwhelm anyone. I do understand that being frustrated is part of the process, so try to go see if you can find the data and start slowly and do a little digging and follow up with some of the webinars with us, or keep your eyes open for when there might be a 5-step process training in your state. And those of you who are overwhelmed, it's perfectly okay. There probably is someone at your institution who either's job this is or who has a passion about this kind of thing. And so I would encourage you to pass this information on to them and see if you can get them involved. But I'm really happy that at least, looks like quite a few of you, 46 plus 33, how good's my math at this moment, 79 people are curious or excited and so would potentially want to continue to participate in taking a look at this with us. Great. So let's see, what happens with step 4? And I told you at the beginning of the presentation that I would probably cover these last 2 steps rather briefly, and so I will. First of all, we're very clear about when you select a strategy, it's important that you pilot test and evaluate it. Don't do something system-wide when you're in a circumstance where you might be able to do it with a small group just to make sure it works, and then you can sort of roll it out in other places. So make sure your improvement strategy works somewhere before you attempt to apply it everywhere. Choose a study design, and what I mean by that is that you have to, consciously think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. How are you going to compare student groups? And we talk a lot about how to do, don't talk a lot, but we give resources to folks about how to choose a study design. And how to go about selecting pilot sites or pilot sites, and when I mean this, it could be even just a classroom. What are your outcome measures that you want to take a look at? Those all have to be set up ahead of time. What are the data collection processes you're going to put in place in order to measure your outcomes? What processes will you put in place to train the pilot site staff, because it's really, really important that they are prepared to implement the strategy. Nothing worse than trying to get people to do something they don't have enough knowledge about. It'll fail just because of that, not necessarily that it wasn't effective. And of course, to evaluate the initial results to determine whether or not you should move forward with doing more. So there are a couple of assessment resources that I'd like to just bring to your attention. First of all, we did 2 webinars with Tricia Berry from the University of Texas at Austin that were just awesome on assessment, and I encourage you to go take a look at those archived webinars. Both of them have to do with building effective program assessments and assessing effectiveness using the Assessing Women and Men in Engineering resources. That link is down on the second bullet. But those are really great tools to help you in developing quality evaluations and assessments of your program implementation. And the last step is to implement the solution. And this, not to give any of the steps any more value than the others, it's important to understand that implementation is key. And that you do lots and lots of very, very careful planning. I wanted to also share with you that we've posted on the STEM Equity Pipeline website, under the Professional Development menu, there is a menu item called the 5-step process. The link is listed here on the screen. But if you go to that page, it has a very brief description of each of the steps, and at the bottom of the page are a series of links to some very detailed manuals about how to do this. There's a handbook that has more detail than you could shake a stick at about the 5-step process. There's a 1-page handout that you can use kind of as an orientation piece. There's a guidebook that we've written specifically about how to use the 5-step process in the context of the non-traditional indicator. And of course, the link to the root causes and strategies resource literature review document is also there too. So I would encourage you to go to that page on the STEM Equity Pipeline .org website to take a look at those items. So, time for a little Q&A. Is there anyone? Let's use the, if it's all right with you all, it would be best for me if we could use the Q&A function if anyone has a question. And Greg, did you want to? Are there any particular questions that you think I should answer first before any of the others? I'm scrolling down here. It looks like there's lots of logistical questions.
Yeah, the ones that are bolded are the ones that haven't been answered yet.
Okay. I'll start there then. Let's see. It looks like the first one is from Diane Walker. It says, Mimi, are the data indicators you list available publicly for California? Yes, they are for California on the post-secondary side. The community college data is available publicly. If you're interested in the secondary data, each of the local educational agency receives a report from the state that indicates their performance on each of the core indicators. It's not posted anywhere on the web, at least not that I'm aware of at this point. And so if, Diane, if you're in a secondary site, don't know exactly where you're from, you should go there. If you're from a post-secondary agency, if you go to the California Community College Chancellor's Office website to the Career and Technical Education section, there is a link there to the VTEA, that's what they call it, the Vocational and Technical Education Act webpage. If you can't find it, Diana, just drop me an email and I'll send the link directly to you. Michelle asked the question, does the crosswalk use top codes for California schools? It does not. And so one of the things I'm 99% sure that this same link that I'm talking about when I mentioned the reference to the previous question also includes on it a list of the top codes in California that are considered non-traditional. So that's available on the Chancellor's Office site. The person who's responsible for the data in California at the Chancellor's Office is Chuck Wisely. Not to necessarily tell you to call Chuck because I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate 500 phone calls, but he's a very responsive guy, and I'm sure if you can't find what you need, you could probably just drop him an email and he'd respond if you are having trouble with the link, or send me an email and I will too. Diane, I hopefully answered your question about the secondary thing, and certainly if you need more information, I would encourage you to send me a private email and I'll see if I can help you find that too. Let's see, Brenda Lysing, can you sort the crosswalk in order to pick out the zip codes that are considered STEM using NSF definitions? Funny that you should ask that question. Actually, if you go on the crosswalk includes, you can actually download it in Excel. The crosswalk includes a column that has the clusters identified. The crosswalk goes all the way out to the clusters in the pathway level. I didn't mention that previously. And so you can look at the way in which we've identified the STEM career clusters and do it that way. But if you're willing to wait a couple more weeks, right now we're in the process of actually doing that ourselves, and I'm just reviewing the last draft of the spreadsheet, and we'll be posting that up on the STEM Equity Pipeline website under the 5-step process section. So it will be there. Brenda Cohen, you asked, what do you mean by performance? And in this case, when I was talking about performance in relationship to Perkins, it's actually whether or not students participate or complete. That's the performance gap that we do. It isn't performance in the sense of students' skill attainment or achievement, grades, or anything related. We're focusing primarily on whether they're enrolling and staying in programs. Claudia Morel, hi Claudia, asked the question, how do we factor out other causes in the statistical model? Students bring a lot with them into the classroom. And you are absolutely right. And that is why we, in the root cause analysis, one of the things we talk a lot about is how do you try to identify root causes and sort of filter through them in such a way that there are some that are in your control and some that are out of your control. There are some that are indirect and some that are direct. And how do we get to the direct root causes that are in your control? You can't solve all the problems. You can only deal with the ones in which you have some impact over. So we do that analysis to some degree. But in many ways, there are a lot of factors that come into play, and at least being aware of those things and encouraging students to think outside the box is part of what we try to do in this process. It's not as clean as we would love it to be. Susan Wheeler asked, are the upcoming training sessions listed on the NAEP website? We have very limited budget. This seems like it would be valuable. Not having to travel would be a plus, and I agree, and that's why we're trying to do as much as we can online. Actually, if you take a look at the home page of the STEM Equity Pipeline website, those will be posted as soon as we get them scheduled. We're in the process right now of scheduling the next 3 of these. It requires getting everybody sort of organized in terms of timing as well as access to our WebEx software. And so I would look for something up within the next week. We'll have the full schedule for the remainder of these webinar series done by then, as well as we'll post up there the trainings that we're, 5-step process trainings that we're going to be doing in other states. And let's see, I think that, oh, one more at the bottom here. Please explain how performance relates to participation completion. What is performance? So I may have answered the question. It's a term that we use in terms of the Perkins measures. Again, not performance in relationship to academic attainment or skill attainment or grade attainment, et cetera, or doing well on a standardized test. In this case, it's actually more behavioral participation program, retention in the program. Well, I think I've gone over. I have 3:01 on the bottom of my computer. If any of you have other questions, you can send me an email, and my email address is mimiluskin@napequity.org. On the screen slide that you're seeing right here, at the bottom where it says www.na, I say NAPequity or napequity.org. It's just my name at napequity.org is my email address. It's been a pleasure being with you today, and again, Greg, thank you for helping set this up and facilitating today's session.
Okay, and I'll just finish here with, remember that this webinar will be available on the www.stemequitypipeline.org website under the Professional Development heading and under Archived Webinars sometime next week. When you close your WebEx program, a few survey questions will open in your web browser that we would like for you to answer for us. Thank you for your time.